This is not the figure of a strange pagan man. It is the figure of a man, an awakened man, a Buddha. And I expect you wonder why the figures of Buddha or of many other Eastern sages that you see are seated like this. This figure of Buddha is in the posture of meditation, and the way in which he is seated, and the whole cast of his features and his expression, symbolize a certain attitude to life, a certain way of looking things, which in Indian and Chinese philosophy is considered essential to sanity. Perhaps I can give you some idea of the meaning of this attitude by demonstrating it with a Chinese character, which represents this whole attitude to life. Most of you probably know that Chinese characters are originally picture writing. And in this particular character, this half of the character is said originally to have represented some water bird, perhaps a stork or a heron. And this other part of the character is, first of all, a sign in the human eye. When you put legs on it, the activity of the eye, and that means seeing. And the whole character is pronounced on. And it means a certain kind of observation, a certain way of looking at things which might be typified by the image of a heron standing at the edge of the water, as in this painting, which is by the great Japanese artist Kanumi Tomobu. There is the heron standing quietly and serenely, watching the water. And so, the whole meaning of this attitude to life is what is summed up in the entire Eastern idea of meditation, typified in these Buddha figures. And I want to try today to explain to you something of the meaning of this attitude to life. Fundamentally, meditation is not so much an exercise as it is a certain way of using one's mind and one's consciousness. Because normally, most human beings, when they use their eyes and their ears, are constantly and chronically straining to see and to hear. And when you come to think of it, that's very odd, because our eyes don't work by effort. They don't have to go out and get the light. The light comes to them. And in the same way, sound comes to our ears, and the sense of touch comes to our fingertips. We don't, for example, have to press a thing hard. If I went in the dark and tried to fumble and feel what this is, I don't have to press very hard to feel it, because the sensation simply of the hard object comes to the nerve end in the skin. And so it's strange, isn't it, that we have acquired the habit of a constant effort to see clearly and to hear clearly. I think part of it comes from school. children are listening to a teacher in class, and fidgeting and getting around, twisting and wiggling. And the teacher says, pay attention! And the children immediately, to ingratiate the teacher, are able to sort of act what paying attention is like. And paying attention, of course, is staring at the teacher. They're very interested in what you say. And sometimes, to get that concentration clear, they clear words rather than using clear, and don't do it with full attitudes, so that the teacher and the other children are trying very hard to attend. And it is through such conditioning as that, through that we must try to see and try to hear in order to have clear sight and clear hearing. And we learn constantly to strain our senses in their use. And as a matter of fact, this improves the character of our senses, because if you try staring hard at the comedy, or staring very hard at the TV screen and looking at it, you'll find that it becomes heavy. Also, in the same way, if you're trying to listen, say, to a telephone conversation with a friend in the house and screen, try to listen to the telephone. You get very angry, and you have to stop to yell at the children to make them be quiet. But on the other hand, if you just let the sound come to your ears, you have no difficulty at all in hearing it. So, you remember then that hearing occurs. Then that hearing is left in the church. And as the whole area of vision is simply coming to the hand of God. And the moment it sees a little in the water, it darts down and gets the fish. Now, I don't think it's true that we have been taught by teachers and parents and so on to try to see and try to hear clearly. There are other factors in the problem. And one of them is that while seeing and hearing, we are trying to make sense of our world by thinking about it. And the act of thinking also introduces an strain into the use of our minds. And I think the reason for this is, perhaps you will remember how I showed you in a previous program, that thought is linear. You know, it goes one word after another. It's strung out in a line. We think thought in a line like this, one after another. Whereas when we see what is going on entirely. We take in a volume when we see. We take in a great area. Nature is a volume rather than something strung out in a line. But when we think, we get one thought after another, and so the process of thought is much slower than the process of seeing and using our consciousness and our mind as a whole. And this then requires a certain effort to make thought keep up with what we are seeing and what we are hearing. Also, you see, thought works by abstraction. What do I mean by abstraction? Well, a lot of Chinese characters are abstractions. If we take, for example, the Chinese character for man, it is written this way. Now that was originally the head and legs of a human figure. Something, you know, like this, when we draw an abstract figure of a man, everybody knows that's a man. But as a matter of fact, it puts out a great deal of meaning. This figure cuts out all the details and gives us a simple image which we can grasp all at once. And we have to do that in order to think, so that we can use a series of very simple images and gasps of the world, and these are abstractions. And it is fundamentally in terms of abstractions that we think. Now, thought, as I said, is slower because it goes in a line, thought after thought. And also thought is abstract. That is to say, it lacks the full living quality of real life. just as this figure here is just a sort of skeleton, bone on top of sticks, and therefore it lacks the vitality, the aliveness of a real man. Now, the more we tend to live in a world of thought, the more we tend to live in an abstract world that is removed from and has a gap between it and the real world of nature. And as a result of this, we tend to live in a world that is in some ways unsatisfying, lacking in vitality and life. And also, people tend to think all the time. This becomes, for every civilized community, every civilized person, a sort of habit, which is like constantly talking to yourself. Now, of course, when you meet me here on the TV screen, I'm always talking. Almost always. But I assure you, I'm not always talking. I'm often silent. Because after all, we have to be silent some of the time, don't we? In order to hear what other people have to say, and therefore to have something to talk about. In just the same way, our minds have to be silent some of the time if we are not to have anything to think about except thoughts. You know, there is a popular proverb that says that talking to yourself is the first sign of madness. And there's some truth in this, because constant thinking, as distinct from simply experiencing through our senses, constant thinking about our experiences, coding our experiences into words, into signs, into the symbols of thought, is a buzz that goes on day in, day out inside our heads, except when we are sleeping. And as a result of that, we begin to live in a world increasingly divorced from reality. And that is why in those Oriental cultures in India and China and Japan, it has always been considered important for everybody to spend some of his time, I know not all of his time, but some of it, with people. That simple, real attitude, which was represented by that Chinese character which I drew at the beginning, pronounced one, or quiet observation. Remember this point, it's important. This is not saying that thinking is a disturbance, is a thing that we shouldn't do. On the contrary, it's a highly important acquisition of man. Thinking is of very, very value to us, unless we also can practice non-thinking, unless we can have our mind silent and make immediate contact with the real world as distinct from the world of pure abstraction. And so this leads to really kind of practice in meditation. And I want to try and show you something about it. By sitting in the posture of meditation, which is commonly used, and approximately like this, and sits upon a firm cushion. Big sheet of telephone in that case. Oh, like this. And ordinarily, among Oriental peoples, they sit in what is called lotus posture, or half lotus posture, as I'm sitting now, which means that the right foot is lifted up onto the left thigh. You decide, of course, that that's an extraordinarily uncomfortable position if you're not used to it. But one of the reasons for sitting that way is that not so much together, but you don't easily fall over if you don't go to sleep. And also that this position gives you a sense of being very firmly rooted to the ground. And then the hands are laid like this. And one then turns attention to letting yourself breathe. You don't need to do an exercise, you're just taking deep inhalations and exhalations. You simply let your breath come as it wants to. But you, if anything, let it drop breath, and the breath becomes with a sigh of relief. And let that be the exercise breath, rather than in breath. You don't close your eyes, you usually look into the chair in front of you. Because the object is not to cut out all the things that you might be experiencing through your eyes and through your ears, through your nose and your nose and skin. Experience, but not to try to cut holding one's experience in things. Simply to think. Talk to yourself. So, the point of this exercise, this posture, is to let come to you without interfering with it when you're sitting like that. You may say, well, that's a great waste of time. There are all sorts of interesting things in life to do. Why just spend some time sitting? And the reason, as I tried to explain, is that it is through this that one comes to have a contact no longer with the world of abstractions, no longer with the world of thought, but with the world that actually is. Now, as you do this, you will notice a rather curious change in the very feeling of life. You notice that there ceases to be what I would call interruption and interval. You see, in a way of using our minds, the chronic sense of strain, the chronic attempt to think about and make sense of what we are feeling, is what we call our ego. If you say, I experience my own existence, I'm more constantly of a will, behind and receiving all that is known, then you get this chronic sensation of a being, an I, a self, who has all these experiences, and that I, a self, is what we call the ego. And this chronic sense of strain has our psychological method against our experience. The thing to hide us from an external world, from within us. But when in this way the interval begins to diminish, we begin to experience our world as ourselves. There is no interval, there is no interruption between the knower and the known. Just as when we're completely absorbed listening to music or dancing to music, we are not aware of our separation from it. We go right with it. And so, in the same way, when the mind responds instantly to what the senses bring, it seems almost as if the nerve and what it experiences are the same. Now, in a way, of course, this is actually true. We can understand this theoretically, but we don't really feel it. For example, you know the old saying, if a tree falls in a forest with nobody listening to it, will be noise. Perhaps you know the limericks in which this problem is posed. I find it exceedingly odd that a tree, as a tree, simply ceases to be when there's no one around in the pod. And the answer was, young man, your astonishment's odd. I'm always around in the pod. So the tree, as a tree, really ceases to be since observed by your faithfully God. But this is a great philosophical puzzle for the Western world. Does what we know depend on there being a knower? Now, in a way, obviously it does. Because when a tree falls in the forest, it certainly makes vibrations in the air. But those vibrations in the air do not become noise unless they vibrate an eardrum. so in the same way, the light from the sun does not become light unless it falls on the earth. And two, we could say the external to hard things, that nothing is hard except the soft surface of the human skin. Nothing is heavy except in relation to human muscles. So if there is life as an organism, the world does not appear to us at all as having characteristics which we attach to an external world. In other words, we could say, the sun is light, but only because of eyes. Rocks are hard, but only because of soft fingers. Falling rocks are noisy, but only because of sensitive human ears. We can have what the world is like without observing matter. Even such things as duration, the span of time, depends upon the human mind to appreciate. Space depends on the human mind to observe the world from a particular position and so know that there are things which are distant from it. Without this mind, there could not be any world that we could think about or conceive or imagine in any way whatsoever. And so this shows in a very clear way that our mind and the external world go together. They are inseparable differences. You remember in a recent program how I tried to illustrate the idea of inseparable differences by taking a coin or an object here like a cigar, which has distinct ends, that you can separate those ends. This is very important. It's worth repeating because it's quite fundamental. If I would want to take one of these ends off and break the thing and throw it away, it would still have another end. There would still be two ends there. I could never get rid of the situation of it having two ends. So you see that although the two ends are different, there is just one object. And so in the same way, although there is a difference in a way between the mirror and the mirror, between me and the mirror, nevertheless, these two go together, and they are fundamentally inseparable. And therefore, when our consciousness is responding instantly, without any interval or interruption, without any, shall we say, stopping to think about it, then we have a situation in which we are actually realizing, we are actually feeling a physical relationship which exists between man and the environment. And this will occur when the experience of once a unity with the universe becomes potential. Now, I think it's difficult to see because, well, if entirely the world of faith, all the things that we perceive in life tend in a way to become arid and unsatisfactory because we are living in an abstract world. In other words, nobody in his senses is going to eat a mango instead of dinner. Nobody in his senses is going to try and get a satisfactory diet of dollar bills. And yet, you see, dollar bills and mangoes stand in the same relation, on the one hand to wealth, on the other hand to dinner, the same relation in which thought stands to reality. They represent it. They symbolize reality, but they are in no sense substitutions for it. Yes, you can do a great deal of things if you have a lot of dollar bills. And unless you exchange those dollar bills into real concrete wealth, they are of no value to you. And so, in the same way, if you try to live in the world of primitive, you begin to who feel a strange, unsatisfactory quality to the world. And this living in pure thought is not something that is only done by, professors and intellectuals and thinking people. Perfectly ordinary people often live in the world of pure thought. As, for example, when we pursue certain goals in life, when we say, I want to be successful, I want to be happy, these are really abstract things. Because supposing you become enormously wealthy and you can afford 3 cars and 6 houses, you can't drive in 3 cars at once. You can't move to 6 houses at once. You have a symbol which you can perceive of your status, but that is an abstract symbol. You can't really perceive success. And so, to overcome that kind of beguilement by the fantasies of thought, not thinking, is important to be able, every so often, to cease the hubbub inside one's head, and to look back into oneself, stop, and come to stillness. You wouldn't, of course, sit in a meditation posture like this, but this is a simple relax, you can sit in the you can lie in the bathtub and do it. You can lie on your back in bed, but the way you get up and leave and do it. Just let your mind alone, and stop trying to make sense of the world. So there is really something to think about other than nature itself. Like if you read books about nothing but books. This is kind of regular scholarship in books about books. So in this way, through meditation, you come to that kind of profound peace. I remember particularly some words by La Carrière, in which he gives a marvelous description of the attitude which these faces represent, which, right alone, shaped by human faith, remains to show the truth eternally divine, and even the truth itself may hold a ghostly power. The soft serenity, the passionless tenderness of these Buddha faces might yet give peace of soul to a West weary of truths transformed into conventions, even if overcoming another teacher to proclaim. I have the same feeling for the high as for the low, for the young as for the injured, for the depraved as for the virtuous, for those holding sectarian views and false opinions, as for those whose beliefs are good.